There is an explosive story involving leaked information about a pro-Israel influence operation right inside the Trump administration. Not only does this campaign seek to benefit Israel, it's also targeting Americans who speak out against the foreign country's undue influence over, our government. The story was brought to us by a former White House correspondent. Her name is Gabrielle Cuccia, who detailed a meeting between a pro-Israel organization known as Vine and Fig Tree, or VFT, and Trump's counterterrorism czar, Sebastian Gorka. Now, she claims, the reporter, in an X post that shortly after the White House meeting, I was connected through a third party and asked to script write for VFT. I was told the script would be used to create an AI-generated video on behalf of the White House, specifically for the National Security Council and Sebastian Gorka. So she described this third party, this individual who approached her, as publicly very Christian and widely perceived as America first. Further, she writes that this person told me they have to do this on behalf of them, meaning the administration, because they don't want it to look like it's actually coming from the White House. You know what I mean? I mean, it worked out for them and Nick Shirley. Okay, let's pause for a second. Worked out for the White House and Nick Shirley. So essentially, Nick Shirley, according to this individual who approached Cuccia, was a plant by the Trump administration. Basically, he was putting out reports on behalf of the Trump administration while concealing the fact that he was doing so for the Trump administration. Fascinating. Now, Cuccia was then given a Dropbox link containing research, polling data, internal comments, and VFT's strategy material. She says that their reports monitor major conservative and dissident right accounts and frequently frame those accounts as vulnerable to or participating in foreign influence operations. By the way, with no evidence. Okay, so here are some conservatives who are very critical of the US alliance to Israel or Israel's influence on the United States. Let's go ahead and put together reports accusing them of all sorts of things, including being paid by foreign actors. So the reports, she writes, include information regarding Nick Fuentes, the Hodge twins, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Jackson Hinkle, Ian Carroll, surprisingly Mario Nawfal, who I think is ridiculously naive sometimes when it comes to Israel, but anyway, they also collected polling and response data surrounding Joe Kent's resignation from the administration. So they're putting together some dossiers, some Oppo research, but the problem with the Oppo research is that they're basically putting together this false case alleging that these individuals are not just people who have their own minds and have an issue with Israel. No. These are people who might be influenced, maybe even paid by foreign actors. So the documents consider deploying Matt Walsh or Michael Knowles to publish on behalf of VFT. No evidence that they're actually doing that. It's just that they're considering it as part of their strategy. Another internal comment weighs in on how they will advise politicians based on their data, which also compiles info surrounding JD Vance's 2028 presidential run. Quote, there is definitely a way to use this in our favor. Tell politicians that there are two wings of the Republican Party. They do not overlap. The majority lies here, the pro-Israel side, I'm assuming they mean. And this is where you should be if you want to get reelected. Of course. If you dare speak out against Israel, you've got no shot at getting elected. So look, we also learn about the use of burner profiles, burner ad accounts, AI-generated propaganda, troll content briefs, engagement testing, and more. And remember, Sebastian Gorka, according to reporting from Ken Klippenstein, which we interviewed him about, by the way, on the show just last week, they're looking to label, Sebastian Gorka specifically, is looking to label right-wing dissidents like Tucker Carlson as domestic terrorists. And he's the one who took that meeting with VFT. Now, VFT is also going after Randy Fine's political opponent, Dan Bilzerian, which Cuccia wrote about and says that they're suggesting that he's funded by Qatar. Right. And as Gen X Girl and Mel report in their Substack piece, very in-depth Substack piece, further investigating this story, they write that Vine and Figtree operates through two tightly linked 501c3 nonprofits incorporated in New York in 2024. The Vine and Figtree Institute quickly raised $3 million in its first year, almost entirely from undisclosed philanthropic donors. It then funneled $850,000 into its sister entity, the Vine and Figtree Fund, which acts as the grant-making arm. In just 1 year, the fund handed out major sums, including $250,000 to Combat Hate Foundation, $100,000 each to Morona Leadership Foundation and the Giving Back Fund, and additional grants to aligned groups. These are all pro-Israel groups, by the way. Both organizations, by the way, claim 0 employees, raising questions about how such large sums of money are being moved with minimal overhead to influence American discourse. Now, the plot thickens because Zach Shapira, who happens to be a former IDF commander and ex-employee, happens to be one of the central figures who's producing VFT reports on conservatives who refuse to bow to Israel. In an April 2025 VFT intelligence brief titled "Foreign Malign Influence Targeting the Trump Administration's Policy and Personnel," Shapira is directly tied to the analysis. And look, the main point of VFT's latest operation is to push the idea that anti-Israel voices are largely the result of foreign psyops that are carried out by countries like Russia, Iran, China, or Qatar.
Let me tell you about someone we hired recently. Great on paper, sure, but what really sold me? They were genuinely interested in the role, asked smart questions. You could tell they actually wanted to work here. Their excitement made their resume stand out from all the others. If you're hiring, you want a candidate who's passionate about your role. But you can't get that insight from just a resume, unless you post your job on ZipRecruiter. Now, you can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/TYT. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology finds qualified candidates quickly. And ZipRecruiter has a new feature that shows you the most interested, qualified candidates first, so you meet the right people faster. Candidates can tell you in their own words why they're interested in your job. No wonder ZipRecruiter's the #1 rated hiring site. Find candidates who really want your job on ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/TYT. That's ziprecruiter.com/TYT. Meet your match on ZipRecruiter.
And Shapira specifically calls for our federal government to do something about it because it's impossible to even consider that anyone would have a functioning brain and think for themselves and maybe see the influence of Israel over our government as something that's detrimental for the American people, right? Look, Zach Shapira is pushing for something known as digital borders, which would ironically deploy the federal government in considering foreign influence as a national security issue. Obviously not the foreign influence of Israel, that's okay. Just the foreign influence of any other country, even though there's no evidence that that's happening. Anyway, this is all about monitoring Americans and finding ways to downrank accounts on social media that they deem merely suspicious in order to censor Americans. It's that simple. Shapira was actually booked on Emily Austin's show to discuss his quest for more censorship of anti-Israel voices on social media. Let's take a look.
On the digital borders front, on the foreign front, transparency is really a big piece of that. There's no deterrent effect. There's no material consequence for creating a bot account, getting suspended, and then trying again. So this is where I think there's room for the government to step in, because if platforms just are playing whack-a-mole constantly, they're on this treadmill, this hamster wheel of trying to constantly purge the account of bots, and the problem is only getting more sophisticated with AI. More and more increasingly, I think we have to get to the root of the problem, which is basically the actual bot farms, the operators, the financial transactions that are underpinning this, the relationships that they have with foreign states. So I don't think that the platforms are in a position to address that, and the government is.
Now, of course, this whole thing is super ironic when you consider the fact that Israel openly talks about investing hundreds of millions of dollars into social media influence campaigns here in the United States, complete with bots, complete with having wealthy billionaires like the Ellisons buy up our media, including our social media. TikTok is an example, of course. They had been eyeing X. I mean, come on. In fact, Emily Austin is an interesting choice for this interview. In fact, why don't we go on a little bit of an adventure and get to know who Emily Austin is and just how intertwined she happens to be with the Israeli government. And I want to show the receipts, the evidence, because it's one thing to throw out allegations, it's another thing to provide the receipts. So let's begin. Back in April of 2023, which of course was months before October 7th, the Jerusalem Post published an article. You're looking at it right now on the screen. It's titled, "Making Israel-US Jewry Relations Cool Again." All right, well, in the body of that article, Emily Austin is described as a social media influencer, Hasbara activist. I'm not kidding, this is a screenshot from the actual article. Hasbara activist, okay, great. But Austin is so much more than a mere propagandist for Israel on social media. In fact, there is evidence that she has worked for the Israeli government directly. Let's show the receipts on that. So Israeli outlet I-24 News reported in January 2023 that Austin had joined Israel's UN mission. Very impressive. Now, the best part about the article is what Austin actually thinks about the United Nations. She calls it an organization she considers to be anti-Semitic, but is very important to her. If it's anti-Semitic, why is it important to you? Anyway, other reporting is a little more in-depth about her role in Israel's UN mission. So why don't we take a look at that? According to a January 2023 article from the Jewish News Syndicate, JNS, titled "Sports Journalist Emily Austin Brings Her A Game in Defense of Israel," writer Bradley Martin notes the following. Austin would begin to serve as a media consultant to permanent representative of Israel to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan. Okay, so who the hell is Gilad Erdan? Well, he's an Israeli politician and a lifelong member of the Likud party. The same political party who notorious war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu belongs to? Yeah, that's the party. Well, Erdogan served as permanent representative of Israel to the United Nations between 2020 and 2024, with Emily Austin under his employ as his media consultant for at least part of his time in that role. Recently, the Times of Israel published a piece noting his current political aspirations. He told the publication that the goal is to establish a new right-wing party. I want to lead and head such a framework, and I am examining whether there is political feasibility for it. In the post-Netanyahu era, I see myself as a candidate for prime minister. I know what Israel needs. If I felt comfortable with what is happening in the Likud, I would return to political activity within the party. So I give you that information because it's important to understand she was working for an Israeli politician representing the Israeli UN mission. She was their media consultant. Emily Austin worked for that guy. So one should wonder how an allegedly 25-year-old woman who was raised in Brooklyn has so many close and cozy ties with members of the Israeli government. For example, Ynet Global's Daniel Edelson wrote in Ynet Global that amongst all the who's who's of the New York City's Jewish community who attended the World Jewish Congress held at the MoMA, the one who caught my attention was a young blonde woman who seemed to be on first name basis with all the VIPs. As a typical Israeli, I was curious to know who this woman was and how has she attained this status? Did she come from money, perhaps she was a byproduct of Hollywood fame? No. He ultimately claimed that an acquaintance of his told him that Austin is self-made and somehow managed to have everyone in the city wrapped around her finger. Yeah, right. Somehow she's one of the top pro-Israel voices who keeps getting invited onto major media outlets like CNN or Piers Morgan, even though she's a bit of a moron. Watch.
The West Bank has a port. They can import and export. Israel gave them a great piece of land. They received billions of dollars in aid, not only from the US,
gave them a great
but
piece of land?
Are you mad? They had a chance to rebuild, but they spent the last 15 plus years crying that they don't have enough land because there is never enough land for them instead of rebuilding.
Was she serious? I mean, the West Bank does not have a port. And despite its name, the Dead Sea is not an actual sea where trade with ships transiting to and fro takes place. But anyway, aside from media invites to discuss topics she knows nothing about, somehow she's always present at all these Israel-aligned events featuring a ton of politicians and political operatives. In fact, here she is with Ophir Akunis, who happens to be Israel's consul in New York on November 15th, 2024.
When I'm here with Emily Austin, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support. You are very brave. You are with Israel, for Israel, and you are struggling for the most important thing. You know what it is? The truth.
Wow. Well, it's easy when I have people like you in New York helping me represent my voice and amplifying my voice, so thank you for your work.
Thank you so much.
Amplifying her voice. Okay, great. So here she is with Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the Iranian Shah, who Israel wanted to install as their puppet monarch in their regime change adventures in Tehran. Austin also attended Benjamin Netanyahu's influencer strategy session back in 2025, where he was heard saying this.
We talked about the woke right, and he said, I call it the woke Reich. That's a brilliant observation. The woke right, because these people, they're not any different from the woke left. I mean, they're insane. They're the base of our support in the United States. That is being challenged systematically. A lot of this is done with money. Money of NGOs, vast. Money of governments, vaster. Okay? We have to fight back. How do we fight back? Our influencers, but we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are the social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is followers. TikTok. TikTok, number one. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And the other one, what's the other one that's most important? X. X. That's very good.
Okay, did you catch that? Because it was quick, but the Prime Minister of Israel referenced the influencers in the room, including Emily Austin, as our influencers, meaning Israel's influencers. This is why so many people believe, myself included, that Austin might be paid by the Israeli government to carry out Hasbara here in the United States. Can you really blame anyone for being suspicious about that? In fact, here's an example of a post that you'll commonly see about Emily Austin on social media. This one's on X, which features a photo of the Israeli politicians, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the influencers who attended this meeting, including Emily Austin. So the person who posted this claims that Israel is paying influencers like Emily Austin and Laura Loomer $7,000 per post. It wasn't a joke. Israel quietly paid influencers on the American right $900,000 to peddle pro-Israel talking points in 2025 and plans to increase spending to $250,000 a month or $3 million annually. Now look, the person who posted that is referencing a September 2025 FARA filing by Bridges Partners LLC, which operates under Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs via Havas Media Germany. Now, the filing made light of Israel's Esther project, which ran from June through November of 2025 and activated a total of 14 to 18 pro-Israel influencers who were allegedly paid $7,000 for each pro-Israel post they made on social media. Now, here's what's important. The filing never listed specific names of the influencers who were paid as part of this foreign propaganda campaign, but many, including the person who posted that allegation, suspected that Emily Austin was one of them, which is why I asked her about it on Her Take back when I was a host on that show. After that meeting, a lot of different news stories came out, including one from Responsible Statecraft, arguing that Israel is paying influencers $7,000 per post. Now, the way that that's being carried out is, in my opinion, meant to kind of make it difficult to figure out where the money's coming from. Conceal the money. Now, that story has led to all sorts of influencers being accused of taking $7,000 per post. I know I've seen that happen a lot with you, Emily, and you were also at that meeting with influencers. So what's the reality of the situation?
So I'll speak on behalf of myself and honestly on behalf of the government a little bit here, the Israeli government. There are a lot of Jewish advocates who are making bank off of this war. And it's not from the government, because honestly, they can't afford what we charge for public speaking. They target influencers who agree with the cause and then recruit us for meetings like what you saw with Bibi for messaging on the same, I guess, wavelength, because everyone's kind of putting all these statements out there, and Bibi was like, why don't we unify our messaging? Now, I think what it turned into was, oh, they don't even believe in the cause, they're getting paid $7,000 per post, which if I was getting $7 grand a post, with all due respect, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I'd be on vacation once a week, because the amount of posts I've done about Israel for free, I'd be a multi-millionaire if that were true, and many others too.
Okay, so she kind of denied it, but she also got caught in a lie and then immediately pivoted to defending the idea of getting paid by Israel to carry out propaganda. And by the way, don't think I missed the fact that she said, let me speak on behalf of Israel. I know, you do that all the time. Anyway, here's what happened next.
I can safely say the government's not funding any influencer. The Esther Project, never heard of it. Whatever you just said, Chava Media, never heard of it. Maybe other people are taking that money. I'm very jealous if they are. Let me know why you're getting paid and I'm not. But this is not something unique to Israel. Imagine women for Trump. We already all like Trump. Now the government's like, hey guys, we're going to pay you to say something you already believe in. I would sign up for that immediately.
With all due respect, I don't think it's completely accurate to say that influencers aren't getting paid, because let me tell you.
By the government?
Wait, they offer that money to me, and I sent you the exact email, and let me pull it up. The Consulate General of Israel, okay, wrote me an email offering to pay me to go to Israel. They would pay all my expenses and also pay me, and then they offered to give me a spot for my guest. I shot that down. I declined because it didn't sit right with me. This is about a year ago, okay? So I don't think Anna was saying that they were targeting Jewish influencers. The issue is that they were targeting influencers. They are targeting influencers.
But yeah, I just said they do these trips to Israel. They pay for the cost and their hotels.
You're saying that the point that she's making is correct. They are targeting influencers to convey a pro-Israel message around the country because they understand.
Did they ask you to put out any messaging, or they offered you a trip?
They did, absolutely.
So look, as you can imagine, that exchange didn't help quell speculation that Austin is a paid propagandist for Israel. Look, if she's being dishonest by saying that Israel is spending no money on influencers, as you just heard her say in that clip, how do we know she isn't being dishonest about her own situation? We don't know. And I personally have a hard time believing her. But honestly, like, who could blame me? I mean, did she really do the video that you're about to see next for free?
Imagine supporting people who start wars just to lose the wars so they can cry about it and then try it all again.
You must see anti-Semites are literally obsessed with Jews. Now walk with me. While you musty anti-Semites are stacking eviction notices, Jews are out here stacking up businesses.
Jews control all the industries. Maybe if you spent more time taking notes from successful people, you wouldn't have to spend your nights and weekends spreading hate from your anonymous account with an anime profile picture.
Do you work as hard as Jews? Do you network like Jews? No, because you're too busy cheering on a group of musty terrorists who smell like dirty earring backs. And if we're gonna keep it real, you're really mad because your income is giving side hustle.
Period.
How you gonna hate from outside, Shabbat? You can't even get in.
You guys did that for free? You did that for free. Okay. Frankly, I personally don't think it matters if she's paid or not. There are clear examples of her coordinating with the Israeli government to carry out their propaganda here in America. That's the issue. And it's especially a problem when she's so close to the White House. I wonder how that happened. So here she is, pictured with the president and UFC owner Dana White in April. Oh, we ain't done yet. She was also pictured at Trump's inauguration. Seems to go to a lot of Trump events. Here she is with US Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, because of course she is. And remember when former Attorney General Pam Bondi pulled that stunt where she got a bunch of conservative influencers together to supposedly hand them the Epstein files, making good on the Trump administration's promise for transparency. But then it turned out that all the documents in the binders were heavily redacted and were already in the public record. Yeah, Emily Austin was part of that humiliating mess.
I saw y'all on the internet coming for Cattell saying he's day 5 and we haven't gotten the Epstein files. Well, I'm here outside the West Wing and look at what we got today. The Epstein files, baby. Let's make America safe again.
Wow, well, how was she chosen along with Laura Loomer to be one of the people attempting to dupe Trump voters who were promised the Epstein files? Who knows? What we do know though is that Emily Austin is represented by one of Epstein's closest friends, Casey Wasserman. So here's Emily's speaker page for Wasserman speakers. Now here, let me zoom in for you guys so you can get a better look at what I'm talking about. Wasserman speakers right there at the top. And then Emily Austin is one of the people represented by this agency. And if there's any question about Wasserman's ties to Epstein, here's Wasserman pictured with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. It says LA 28 chairperson Casey Wasserman because he's the chairperson for the Olympics in 2028. Now, Emily deleted any reference to her Wasserman representation from her X bio following Bindergate, especially as people kept pointing to the fact that Wasserman was close to Epstein. So he's also, by the way, a huge donor to Israel. Here's an example of what I'm talking about here. So there you go. Wasserman's CEO, Casey Wasserman, donated $525,000 to Friends of the IDF, $25,000 to Israeli right-wing organization Stand With Us, $1 million to AIPAC campaigns. So when you really consider the tangled web Israel weaves in the United States, and you get a sense that a small group of people are well coordinated, working together to ensure that our government is working for them and not for us, it does really feel super ironic that you have Vine and Fig Tree pointing to undue foreign influence carried out by other countries and how they're supposedly in the heads of all these conservative content creators and influencers who have critical things to say about Israel. If we're gonna have a conversation about foreign influence, you can't tell me that an organization that's working on behalf of Israel's interests should be the ones rooting out foreign influence here in the United States. Anyone who dares to speak out against Israel's undue influence over our government must be destroyed, according to Fig and Vine Tree, Vine, Fig Tree, whatever. But that's exactly what Vine and Fig Tree is up to in an effort to destroy Joe Kent, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Mario Nawfal, and others. I don't care what you think about these people politically. You should be against these types of campaigns against American citizens who are simply practicing their political speech, political expression in criticizing a foreign country. Because if they're coming for them, what, you think they're not gonna come for you if you're on the left? And the left is far more critical of Israel than most people on the right are. This is not okay. These types of campaigns are not okay. And it's sick to see this coordination happening between Shapira and Austin, when in reality, Austin, we have a mountain of evidence tying Austin to coordinating with the Israeli government in order to propagandize the American people. You got a problem with foreign influence, how about you take a look at your own house? But they're not gonna do that, of course. So, there you have it, that's the story. Highly recommend you guys follow Gen X Girl Files on Substack. That's the in-depth reporting I was referencing in the piece. So check that out, and then check out Kuchia's thread on X where she gets into the specific documents. She provides the receipts, provides the documents, and you can take a better look at what these organizations are really up to behind the scenes and how they're trying to work alongside the Trump administration in targeting individuals, conservative individuals who are critical of Israel. It's insane.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.